So today I am preparing sourdough loaves that I will be baking tomorrow. This is really a 3-day process for me. So last night I pulled out my sourdough starter right here. I fed it just to get it a little reinvigorated. So I took it out of the fridge, fed it, let it sit overnight. This morning I prepared a leaven, and that leaven is currently fermenting downstairs. That will be added to this dough a little later on. And right now I'm going to be actually mixing the dough for the autolyse, wherein the flour and the water are just mixed together and the flour is hydrating and gluten is beginning to develop. I use 1,000 grams or a kilogram of flour for this, and my breakdown of that is 25% all-purpose whole wheat and 75% unbleached all-purpose flour. So that makes up 250 and 750 grams each for the total of 1,000. I do a 75% hydration, so I'm going to use 750 grams or mils of water. Eventually, a little bit down the road, I'm going to be adding 18 grams of fine sea salt to it, so that makes 1.8% addition of that. And when I do go to add the leaven that is downstairs, it's going to be 200 grams of leaven, so that makes that a 20% addition for that, based on total flour weight. So, just to start off here, I'm going to take this stainless bowl. I will tare my scale. First thing I'd like to do is add my water, so we'll go with 750 grams of that. Way overshot. Just going to quickly remove some of that. I do like to get the water quite accurate. Well, I can live with 1 gram. Next, I like to add the wheat flour. So we're looking for 250 grams of that. It's pretty close. Oh, yeah, overshot just a touch. It'd be really sweet to pre-weigh this stuff before I started to shoot. Next, we're going to go with the all-purpose unbleached white flour. And I need 750 grams of that. A little bit more. Can we nail it? There we go. Beautiful. Now, I will just move my scale out of the way and go to mix it. I used to do this all by hand, but it makes quite a mess, this first step. So recently I've switched up to just a silicone spatula. I'm hoping to upgrade to a silicone spoon here at some point. But I'm just going to mix it all up as thoroughly as possible. I mean, don't take forever to do this, but you don't really want to leave any dry clumps of flour sitting around. Otherwise it'll wind up being kind of hard and crusty when you actually go to mix it, and it's pretty difficult to take care of it at that point. So if you can take care of that and get it nice and hydrated during this step, you save yourself some frustration and work down the road. It's getting pretty close. So you can see it doesn't take too terribly long to get it mixed up. Just about a minute or so. Just a little bit of dry flour left in there. Kind of digging through it a little bit. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. All right, so just scrape the rest of this off here. Now my plan for this is to just leave it on the counter. While I have my leaven kind of sitting at a little warmer temperature at 75 Fahrenheit, my kitchen's at 70. And I'll just leave this here. If you go too much warmer than that, you risk it, the gluten kind of doing its thing a little too quickly and you'll run into trouble. So what I'm going to do now is I just need to quickly cover this up just so it doesn't dry out. Just like that is good enough. And I will just leave it on the counter kind of out of the way for the next couple of hours until I'm ready to add the leaven. So that's step 1. So, next step here. The dough has been autolyse for just about 2.5 hours now. So you can see it's pretty good, fairly hydrated. It's quite a bit different than it was when I initially mixed it. And over here, I've got my leaven, which has been going for about 6 hours. So yeah, so this is what's going to ferment the sourdough for us. And this is obviously the bulk of our dough. So I'm going to put this on here. I'm just going to tare my scale, and I'll be adding 200 grams of the leaven to the dough. Let's see how close I get here. I'm not even going to mess with that. We'll leave it at that. All right, so first thing though, I'm going to take this leaven container. I am going to wind up using, see how much extra leaven I've got here. I usually try to make enough that I can use this for another project, whether it's for some pancakes or banana bread or something like that. Some cinnamon buns. Anyway, put that aside here. Then I'm going to wet my hands, and then I'm going to start to work this in, and I'm going to mix it for about 5 minutes. I want to make sure that everything is really nicely incorporated. So first I'm just going to smooth out the leaven over top of it, and then I'm going to kind of start to pinch down with my fingers, forcing that leaven into the dough, and then kind of bringing it up. I have this little motion I do where I kind of call it like a pinch and fold, right? I kind of pinching and pushing it down and alternating with my hands here. And when you do this, when you did your initial autolyse, if you missed any of the dough, if it wasn't completely hydrated, when you're doing this, you'll feel it, because most of this is really nice and soft, and you can see like how different that is from when I initially mixed it. You can stretch it and everything. Nice, the gluten is nicely developing, but you'll feel some harder parts on the inside there. Almost feels like there's something stuck in that dough. If you come across anything like that, you can I just pinch it out like that and squish it out, and then it should hydrate not too badly. It's obviously easier if you had taken care of that during that initial mixing for the autolyse, but if not, this will be okay. So I'm just going to mix like this for, like I said, approximately 5 minutes, and we'll be back. Okay, so that's been 5 minutes. It's all really nicely incorporated, and that's fantastic. So I'll just pick off some of the extra dough that's stuck to my hands, get it back in there. Now I'm going to leave this for half an hour. I'm going to cover it back up, leave it for half an hour, and that'll give the yeast a bit of a jump start on this to ferment before I add my salt. So I'll let it rest for 30 minutes, and then I add the salt and mix it all again. So see you in 30. All right, it has been 30 minutes, so I'm just going to pop this dough out. And now we're going to take the salt. This is 18 grams of fine sea salt. I'm just going to sprinkle it over top. A little clump of it there. Sprinkle it all in. I'm just going to wet my hands again. So it hopefully won't get quite as sticky. And then I'm just going to mix this up again. I like to use the same sort of motion that I was when I was mixing the leaven into it. We're going to mix this for, again, about 5 minutes. And what that's going to do is, well, mainly get that salt really nicely incorporated inside this dough throughout all of it. And then, yeah, I'll see you in a few minutes. So we're hitting the 5-minute mark here right now. The dough is definitely getting a lot of strength while still building some extensibility. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now leave it alone for 30 minutes, and then it's going to be time for the first stretch and fold. So I'm just going to clean up here. I will cover it back up and toss it back in that incubator just so it's nicely out of the way and continuing to do its thing there. So it's been 30 minutes and the stove is looking fun-tacular. What I want to do now is the first stretch and fold. So I just spray down my work surface here with some more filtered water. I'm going to make sure that my bench knife is also sprayed down in case I need it. And I'm just going to wet my hands. Now I'll quickly just get my hand in here and scoop out the dough, just kind of working it up so that in a second here, it should hopefully just come right out. Nice. See? Got it all out. Now, what we're going to do is the first stretch and fold. So, I'm going to take the dough, I'm going to stretch it up, fold it over on itself, patting it down. I'm going to do the same thing from the other side. I'm just going to slide it around and pat it. Another stretch and fold. Stretch it. You want to be careful not to accidentally tear it, but you should be able to feel when it hits that breaking point. And one more here. And stretch it over. Lots of love pats. Nice. Now, just going to get it back into the bowl. We'll leave it in here for another 30 minutes and then it'll be time for the lamination. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes. It is time for the lamination. You can see the dough is just beautiful right now. It's coming along quite nicely. So this is a process that I started recently on the recommendation of a friend of mine who makes sourdough, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm going to wet down the surface of the table. I'm going to wet my hands. I'm going to just get this ready to come out, and it shall. There we go. Very nice. Okay, so now the trick is essentially we're going to get this dough, it'll wind up sort of being like a rectangular shape. And so I'm getting my fingers underneath here, and I'm just kind of pulling it and stretching it out. You have to take care not to pull from there, but rather I'm kind of going from the center so that you don't wind up with just a big mound in the middle. I'm going to just stretch it out. This is going to be a great way to help develop some layers of that gluten once we fold it back in on itself here. You can see just how much it likes to stretch now. It's fantastic. This is a great point in the process where if you want to be adding something to your dough, if you're making like cheese sourdough, or one thing that I like to make around Christmas for my Portuguese in-laws is kind of like a Portuguese-inspired sourdough where I'm adding a bunch of chopped parsley and chopped presunto, which is a Portuguese version of prosciutto, and olives and stuff like that. And this would be a great time for you to actually, you could sprinkle it all on prior to folding it back together. So, done a pretty good job here of just getting it all nicely stretched out as much as possible. It's fairly uniform throughout. And now it's time just to essentially get it back together. Stretch just a touch more so it's uniform. Okay, perfect. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this edge here. I'm going to fold it up basically a third of the way. And then I'm going to fold this over on top of it. I'll just pat it all down. If you see any bubbles at this point, it's most likely that they're just from the stretch and fold and from this lamination fold that we're doing. And we'll fold like so. We'll fold one more time over on top of itself. And the lamination is done. So now I'm just going to take it, I'll just kind of tuck it around like this. Get it back into sort of a round shape-ish. Get it back in the bowl. Oh, actually, you know what I'm going to do? This is a great time for me to use my next bowl, just because it's going to be quite a bit cleaner. So I've got this bowl here. Just going to set it in. And we'll leave that for another half hour, and then we're going to begin our coil folds. So So it's been another 30 minutes, so it's time for the first of 2 or 3 coil folds that we'll do, just kind of depending on what the dough is doing. One thing I do want to mention though is that obviously between each of these little sessions I've been cleaning up my work surface, just because that, after that lamination especially, because it was kind of doughy, wet, goopy, and if it dries it's going to be a nightmare. So the bench knife was really key in getting that cleaned up. And then also cleaning out the bowl, the last bowl that the dough is rising in. If you can get that wet and cleaned up right away, it saves you a lot of hassle down the road. So anyway, time for this first coil fold. I'm just going to wet my hands for this. This is a pretty quick process. So the trick is I'm essentially going to work around it. I'm going to scoop up, I'm going to fold so that this end here kind of tucks underneath. I'm going to set it down, I'm going to pick it up, and then have the other side kind of tuck around underneath as well. All right, so I'm just going to loosen it a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to go up like that. Try and get this all the way. Okay, so we'll tuck like that. Now this other side was still a little stuck down to the bowl. That's not a problem, because now when I do the other side, I'll tuck it underneath. So if you were to look at it, it's kind of coiled like that, right? And so then I'm going to do it the same. I just gave it a 90-degree turn, and I'll do a coil and another coil like that. Got some little hats there. Work out any air. Hopefully they got stuck. I'm going to leave it like that for 30 minutes. I'll come back and do another one, and we'll see how it looks then. Alright, so it's been another 30 minutes, so let's just take this out. Just pulled it out of the incubator. So again, every time when I'm not actually working with it, it's covered and it's in there just staying at temperature. So let's do a second coil fold here and see how things are looking. So I'm just going to pick it up a little bit there. Alright, and fold and coil. Now we'll do this side here. Coil and coil. You can see it's retaining its shape fairly nicely at this point, so that gluten's really developing well. I'll likely give it one more. I'll check on it in 30 minutes. I'll likely give it one more coil fold just for good measure, and then after that we'll let it sit for a bit. So okay, we'll check on it in 30. Alright, so here we are. So this is after the rest following the second coil fold. It's really starting to look beautiful here now. You can kind of see how it's kind of pulling away a little bit from the sides. I think I will do one more coil fold just to make sure everything's strong enough. These coil folds aren't very invasive anyway, so just going to do a little tuck around here. And coil, 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 and finally coil. Starting to get a little jiggly and whatnot. Okay, so the plan now is I'll put it back in the incubator, I'll cover it up, throw it back in there. We'll check on it in 30 minutes just to see if it looks like it's ready for the division, because this will make 2 loaves, and pre-shaping, or if it needs a little bit more time, but we'll check on it in 30. Okay, so this is after 30 minutes from that final coil fold, and it's looking really good. So you can get a little jiggle going on there. It's holding its shape nicely, so it's undoubtedly nicely filled with a lot of teeny little bubbles there that aren't popping or anything like that. So really excited about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly flour this surface here. I'm going to flour up a little bit, and I'm going to get the dough out onto the table. It's time to divide it into 2 and then do my pre-shape. So that's the plan. So I'll just dig around there to loosen it up a little bit and let it take it. Oh, I was going to say let it take its time coming out, but it did it all on its own. And look at the bowl, it's really quite clean. So I'm really happy about that. Just gonna get this excess flour out of my way. So I'll wind up trying to put it. I'm just going to move this water here. No longer need that. I'm just going to make a little area over here where they're going to sit afterwards. Okay, so I just like to try to get it into a roughly symmetrical shape here. so that when I split it, it's more likely to actually be kind of equal. This is the hardest part of the entire job, in my opinion. So, right about here, let's call it. Okay, nice. So, I'm just gonna do a little mini stretch and fold here. Flip it upside down. I'm just gonna shape it. So I'm just being really gentle. I'm kind of tucking down with my one hand, down and underneath. The whole idea here is to be getting it the surface, some surface tension there, so it's nice and kind of tight around the top, so that it'll be more likely to hold the shape. If you see any bubbles, you can feel free to just kind of pimple pop them there. Just make sure that it's any of those bubbles, if they wind up staying, they're just going to muck up your finished product. So there's one. Just tuck it up over here. And second one. And here we are. This is a nice spin. Tuck it around. And put it over there. And then finally, I'm just going to cover it up. I'll just use my bowls here, my proofing baskets, and I'll let it sit for, I'm going to check on it in about 25 minutes, and we'll see what they look like, and if they're good, I'll just do a quick final shape and get them in there. Alright, so let's check these out. Okay, yeah, so they seem to have held their shape a bit. Obviously, they've kind of spread out a touch, but they're certainly not pancaking or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rice flour, and I'm just going to coat the inside of my baskets here. And this will just help prevent them from sticking, especially when it's go time tomorrow with baking. So, these, pull them up. I'm just going to do one last little shape. Just make sure that they're as nice and tight as they can be right before they go in. Just like that. Nice and big again. This one will do the same. Gently getting it in there. Okay. Awesome. Okay, good stuff. So, last step before I do that is I'm just going to sprinkle the tops with a little bit of flour because I'm going to be turning them upside down into the baskets. So, number one, gently set it in there. And then number two, gently set it in there. And then all I need to do with these is wrap them. And I like to use my trusty old grocery bags for that. Get them in here. Again, I will clip them. Now the idea is that they will go in the refrigerator overnight. Usually give them, so right now it's about almost 8 o'clock at night. Probably first thing in the morning, say 8 o'clock or so, I'll start preheating the oven and whatnot, and then bake them as soon as everything's ready for that. So that's it. Bread loaves made. And here they are hanging out in the fridge. So perfect, good to go. Keep her at 11, people.